Alright folks, my name is Freyn, and this video is potentially going to be channel suicide before I've ever really gotten off the ground. But I'm going to attempt to talk about some of the recent outcry from the community, what I honestly consider to be some pretty stupid comments. So, quick note first of all, the background footage is completely unrelated and just something to prevent the screen from being solid black constantly. But let's get started. First thing to mention is the Gaijin content program. Yes, I am in it myself, although it is due to my Twitch channel rather than my YouTube. As you can see, my YouTube is, well, quite small. But this does not mean I'm a shill or that I'm paid by Gaijin in any way. For those who don't know, the content program is essentially a trade of services with Gaijin. We as creators showcase the game a little bit for them, and the company provide us with the occasional free golden eagles or vehicles to facilitate making that content. How much each creator receives varies quite a bit, both in terms of what we're allowed to receive based on our channel size, but also what we actually request. We do have to send out a request for these, we don't just get it automatically added. Personally, at this stage, I've received 4 vehicles from Gaijin. These are the Centurion AVRE, the Shotcal, VFW, and the Merkava. Well, Merkava? I can never remember. Now, outside of this, my account is entirely my own. It's entirely free to play. I've never spent anything on it. Thank you to those who have. Obviously, you support the game. I just don't have the money to spend. But all my gold has come from doing Golden Eagle wagers. I've spent that on premium time or low tier premium vehicles, usually during a sale when I can get it for 50% off. So being in the content program hasn't particularly changed my viewpoint on the game in any way. I just want to get that across. There also seems to be a bit of misconception that creators are somehow paid to say that the game is fine. Well, that's absolutely not the case. Certainly not for any of the creators who primarily focus on War Thunder. The larger ones, the outsider, YouTuber or Twitch personality, might be paid to play. I know a lot of you will remember a big fuss over Shroud last year stating that he would like to play the game if Gaijin paid him, for instance. They aren't required, if they do get paid, they aren't required to say it is a good game at all. But they are required to state whether they have been paid for it. That they have to do that. The rest of us, the specifically War Thunder YouTubers, aren't under any obligation to say anything specific, and a lot of us are frequently quite critical. Personally, I have my own grievances with the game and with the company's business direction as of late. I'm not their biggest fan, and anyone who follows me would know that I quite often voice my complaint about certain aspects, for better or for worse. But with all that aside, hopefully the video will now be taken at face value and we can move on to talk about the actual main item and reason of this. And so this is the main crux of this video and what has sparked me to make it. Fix the game has been a phrase that gets thrown around quite often already and always has been. Even by myself during streams, moments of frustration with things like hull break not being consistent, I'll often go, fix the game! But in the past day or so, it's really been spammed around in a lot of places on a completely different level. In particular, the phrase fix the game in 1.91. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a bit and explain why it's both kind of a stupid thing in the first place, but also why it's never going to happen. So first off, it's a really simple one. 1.91 is literally just around the corner. We've maybe got a month left, and it's already basically finalized at this stage. So nothing is going to change with that update. It's a very unrealistic request already before we've even really begun dissecting it. These updates are going to be planned months ahead of time before the previous update was released, and possibly, even 2 updates ago they decided what was going to be in this. But Fix the Game is an incredibly broad statement as well. It's broader than broad, really. How are Gaijin meant to interpret this? What exactly is it that's being asked for? Every single player is going to have a different idea of what needs changing to consider the game fixed. For some players, it's going to be specific vehicle battle ratings. For others, it's just all about map changes. There'll be players whose biggest issue is ghost shells. Some are purely interested in World War II, while others only care about 10.0. You'll have some who just really want Air RB to be completely overhauled. Some who don't care about it at all. Even just among the content creators, there is no agreement really. There are some specifically who want the close air support to return to the God mode state that it used to be, while others, including myself, just really want to have the complete opposite and have a tank only game mode where we can be free from the close air support. Basically, there is and never will be any consensus on what would fix the game or even take a step towards fixing it. But regardless of all that, it's really important to understand that's just not how game development works. Gaijin can't simply say, okay, this patch is going to be like all our resources are devoted to fixes. There will be no content. They just can't do that. Companies are, for one thing, already divided into several different sections with employees that perform different roles. A map maker isn't just going to suddenly switch over to coding AI. A community manager won't suddenly start creating vehicle models. It just doesn't work like that. It would be really foolish to have staff just sitting around idle because they decided they didn't want new content, and they can't reassign the staff. So the content's going to be produced regardless because they have people that are being paid to do this and can't do anything else. To take it a step further, would a patch of purely bug fixes really satisfy people? For one thing, bugs don't take a fixed amount of time to resolve, and when they are resolved, would it not be better for them to just be implemented as soon as possible rather than delaying it to lump it into a larger patch? Any fixes or changes are going to need to go through testing and quality assurance. And yes, I do agree here that Gaijin's quality assurance is slightly lacking. But these are all processes that need to be completed. What if the patch didn't fix a specific bug an individual was annoyed by either? Would they still be happy when they saw the big bug list, but the one they were most bothered about wasn't in it? Now their issue isn't going to have been resolved, and they've got no new content, so there's nothing. There's always going to be more complications to the whole thing as well. So, like, let's take ghost shells for instance. Ghost shells could be any number of issues. There could be multiple things that cause them. I'm not even going to begin to try and discuss what those might be, but there could be lots of different reasons. We recently had a patch note that said a rare instance has been fixed, and a lot of people took issue with the wording, saying it's not really rare. But not only is it quite possible that this particular patch only fixed one particular cause, but in terms of rareness, think of how many shells are fired each day. I mean, personally, I can fire anywhere from 10 to 40, 50 shells in a game, depending on how well it goes. You play multiple games per hour, per session, and there's more than just you participating, obviously. So it's going to be a fraction of a percent. We see a lot of evidence for it, of course, at the moment, but that's also confirmation bias, because who's ever going to post a clip when their shell doesn't ghost? You're only ever going to see the bad ones. Again, though, this is probably only one root cause, and the fix itself could have also had knock-on effects to other things. It would be great if they could really test it and make sure it doesn't have this knock-on effect. But it's kind of hard to test things in a closed environment behind the scenes. It just doesn't get the same level of testing. You can't have that same level of testing as you can with the live environment and how many people are playing. Now, on top of that, we also have some other discrepancies. Like, several people might interpret a ghost shell as a different thing. To me, a ghost shell is when it simply doesn't interact with anything at all. You see the tracer, but it's physically intangible. It literally ghosts right through them and the terrain. I've seen other post shots that hit the ground, that have overpenned, that have non-penned due to striking at a high angle. You've had hit cam bugs, any number of different things, and people will call it a ghost shell. Because ghost shells are just the current buzzword complaint going around, and they want any explanation they can as to why they were unsuccessful. Most people won't even bug report these things to begin with, which obviously isn't going to help, but even those who do aren't always going to help the process, because what happened isn't actually a bug shell and a ghost shell, and so what they're reporting isn't even related to the issue at hand. And it ends up slowing the process because the devs still have to go through all these reports only for it to be completely useless. So as you can see, even on the surface, without delving into the issues of coding these things, it can be pretty difficult to fix a bug. But now, even if this Ghost Shell fix had shut down all of those instances, would it really be better if that was held back to be incorporated into a larger update like 1.91 instead of being rolled out the moment it was ready? The obvious answer is no, and that's why you don't get patches that are entirely devoted to bug fixes, because any sort of reasonably large bug is fixed as soon as possible. The closest any update would come to fixing the game is going to be some form of large-scale mechanical change or a game mode change. It would still never come without content attached, and I've already outlined why. There is other things to consider as well. If we ignore the bug side of all this and just focus on mechanical or gameplay changes for a bit, we could look at some of the suggestions that have been thrown around. There's comments like skill-based matchmaking, or having the ability to vote out maps you don't want to play, more tournaments. The list goes on. But a lot of these suggestions would really only work with a larger player base. Some of them would potentially encourage some old players to return or make new players stay longer, sure. But in the interim period, it would disrupt some things to a pretty large extent. I'm generally pretty happy with queue times. I play mostly ground realistic. I don't find the queue times to be anything problematic at all. If they added another mode that split the player base, I don't think I would really be too unhappy with it. But lots of players might. Now, if you add in, let's go with the skill-based matchmaking one. How long would those queue times become if the player base is now really heavily divided down based on a form of rating? Especially with how many modes already exist. That's going to be a huge effect. Now, eventually, if the population grew because of old players returning and such, well, then that would settle out and those queue times would go away. But you've got to get to that larger population first. And initially, it's going to have the opposite effect. Those queue times are going to get so much that probably you'll lose people instead. So really, it requires more than just this end game solution or suggestion. You need to have a smooth transition to get there. And that's going to be a way harder thing to iron out. And this is just one suggestion. We haven't even really gone into any of the other aspects of this. So, yeah, even those who do propose sort of an idea of what should be changed in the game, it needs so much more than that for it to be something that Gaijin can jump on and go, yes, brilliant, that's what we're doing. Anyhow, this video has already gotten a bit long, so we'll move on. There's only one other thing I really want to touch on. Now, a lot of people may remember the parts and FBE scenario that occurred last year, and some may also remember the paid modification suggestions from about a year prior to that. Both of these were really large community outcries that had an effect, but both were successful because the community had a single solid voice. something which, as mentioned before, just isn't going to happen with things like Fix the Game. Now, both those major things, the modifications, the pay-to-win modifications, as most people refer to it, were handled better. There was multiple well thought out responses and posts. It showed that the reception was not positive. Parts and FB, on the other hand, that was a lot more messy. Aside from a few PR mishaps adding fuel to the fire, it ultimately came down to the community just yelling as loud as they could. And yes, it got results. I wish it hadn't come down to that and had been achieved by something a little calmer, because it's honestly set a precedent, and now people think that that's just the way to get what they want. Scream louder and louder and louder. I've seen some individuals propose various ways to get guys' attention, things like a mass boycott of the game, which, well, honestly, that's ludicrous given what a minority percentage would ever be involved with such a thing. But all of these ways to get their attention, just for everyone's sanity, please don't go spamming on Twitch or YouTube. It's never going to end well. The people you're spamming to aren't in charge. Ultimately, it's going to get you ignored. You can cry about freedom of speech all you want, but there is no obligation for them to let you do this. That's just not how freedom of speech works. It's the internet, but it's also a privately run platform by a company based in a different country to most of you, and in a different country to the one that's running the game. Honestly, if you came by my own stream and spammed things like this, you'd get removed because it's just disruptive. It's not helping what we're there to do. I don't want to insult anyone with any of this, but doing this is just honestly idiotic. So I'm all for getting changes in this game. Absolutely, I've said already, I have my own problems with it. But even if you can put your own ideas aside and just follow your favourite content creators' ideas instead, you're still never going to get a consensus. We all have our own different desires for the game. And, who's to say at what stage the game is fixed? Everyone's got a different line for where that can finally occur. So the best you can do is create a constructive, well-detailed suggestion and post it to the forums in the right section. Deeper you go with the suggestion, the better. But mindless hashtag spam, insulting people who are just trying to host a stream, community managers who are literally just relaying a message, it's not a good way to go about it. The last few months of how the community has gone, seeing some of the behind the scenes stuff due to being in the content program, various things like the YouTube Cup, seeing the interaction between different creators, staff members, various things. If anything, this has all given me a hell of a lot more respect and sympathy for the staff members who have to deal with this on a daily basis. But that's it for now, really. This has gone on way longer than I intended. Yeah, I doubt it's really had any impact to anything, particularly as I'm a very small channel and I doubt many people will see this. Hopefully it's explained a few things about how all this will works. Hopefully I've made some impression to a few people. It's not how I really wanted my first discussion video to go, as much as I do get a certain kick from watching drama on the outside, I've never really wanted to involve myself in it. I really do think a lot of these complaints are just coming from ignorance of how development works, and the more you know, the better things can be. So thank you all very much for watching. If you do want to see more of my ramblings, feel free to stop by my stream or my Discord, as well as return to this channel. And perhaps I'll see you next time.